Hello everybody, my name is Brian of Hessens County and I'm glad you could join me today. Earlier this month, the Solo But Not Alone bundle was started for the second time by Kat McDonald of Peach Garden Games. And this year, it's even bigger. So for those of you who are not familiar with this bundle, last year, a bunch of people who had created solo role-playing games had kind of gotten together and created a big giant bundle with the idea of raising money for Jasper's Game Day. Jasper's Game Day is an organization that was started with the idea of helping address suicide prevention and other issues related to that. So last year, it was a really big success. They raised over $30,000. We're kind of hoping to do the same thing this year. With that, this year's bundle has over 101 games, sort of donated essentially by 74 creators, admittedly, including me. My solo game, The Land and the People, is included in the bundle. So far we've raised about $11,000, as you can see here. This is about midday on the 16th, so things are going well so far. Hopefully we'll go far beyond our goal this year. But if you haven't necessarily looked at it, or you don't necessarily know about it, I'm going to be trying to create a video every 1 to 2 weeks looking at one of the games that is featured in the bundle. Obviously, I can't cover anywhere near to everything. So the basic idea is just to kind of cherry pick things that I'm personally interested in or things that I think that a lot of other people really should be paying attention to. The particular game we're going to be taking a look at today is partly a game and also partly a world-building tool that's taking a look at the concept of religion. And that game is called Schisms and Sacrilege, which was created by Michael Elliott of Not Writing. You can find them under Not Writing on itch.io. Along with some of their other works as well. It's a basic world-building game where you are creating the sort of history, beliefs, and other basic structures behind a religion within a world. So you could use this to kind of create a religion for a whole new world. Maybe this is sort of like the spawning point for your world-building creation process. Or this is more geared towards creating a religion that you might fit into a world that you've already created, maybe a world you're actively using for your role-playing group. In order to use this, you need to have, obviously, this rulebook, right? They recommend about an hour or two, although admittedly, I've kind of blown through this system in about 20 minutes. So if you're really short on time, you could potentially do it shorter than that. Something to write down with. So, like, your usual either a journal or notepad or note cards, Word document, things like that. A way to keep time, because there are time periods where the book will kind of ask you to kind of sit and think about things in between different stages. So you might want to have a timepiece to kind of monitor that if you wish. And a 4-sided dice, which is, again, optional, as they note here. This is only really something that you want if you're having a hard time making a decision between certain elements that I'll discuss in just a moment. Now, for a solo game, one thing that I really like about this particular tool is the fact that they include this page that you can see here on safety tools. Obviously, certain types of safety tools don't work for solo games, like, an X card. You don't need to use an X card to tell yourself that you don't like what's happening. Instead, what they recommend is that you essentially create what they're calling a taste menu. Now, this taste menu is very similar. If any of you are familiar with the Sandra Germain and one other person from Monty Cook Games came together and created the Consent in Gaming manual, which contained a lot of recommendations on different sorts of safety tools and things. And one of the things that they included was a big long list of basically a safety checklist. Right. The main point is that this taste menu that they have here, they're not just marking out things that you don't want to include, but also marking out things that you do want to include, which of course is very important when you're creating an element that you're going to include into a world. So on your taste menu, you would not only want to note down things that you don't want, like, oh, we don't want, violence against children or something like that. Or we don't want elements within the game that includes like species or racial violence, right? But also you want to mark down things that you do want to include. So, for example, I do want to have intelligent animals in this world, and so this is something I probably want to include in the religion. I do want to have, this is a world that is going to have magic, so that's something that we're going to want to take into account. Or maybe there's a species like the elves that are effectively immortal. So that's something we're going to want to consider when we're kind of creating like the afterlife for this religion or whatnot. If you are using this tool to create a religion for an existing world, this would actually be, in the note column in particular, this would be a great place to take a look at the safety tools and checklists that you might have already used with the people that you are already creating this world with, like your players, and in order to make sure that you're not including elements that they have already indicated that they don't want to be involved in the game. Now, this section mainly talks about the basics of how this tool is going to work. So the tool itself is split up into 5 chapters, and each chapter is split into 4 verses. There's a Bible joke for you guys. So basically, in each chapter, we're talking about a specific time period within the religion. So, for example, the first chapter is obviously talking about its foundation. The second chapter is talking about like the immediate aftermath of, let's say, the death of the original creator, all the way up to the last chapter, which is in recent history, right? And each of the verses within it are a specific type or class of events that potentially could occur during that time period of the religion that would have a really major effect on how you think about the religion as a creator, and also how people inside of the world think about the religion and how it influenced its history. Over here in the list of traits, while you're creating your religion, there isn't a specific set list of things that you're going to want to keep track of. Although there are things that, of course, would be very important for you to know about, either as a world builder or potentially as a player who's going to be a follower of this religion or whatnot. So these are these sort of traits that they have examples of here are things that you're going to want to kind of keep track of that could potentially change over time. So, for example, we have beliefs and prohibitions. Those are pretty obvious. So things that the religion believes in and things that the people who believe in this religion think are or are not okay. Like when it comes to like behavior. So, for example, don't eat pigs, right? Or you can only do certain things on certain days. So some other traits that they suggest that you might want to keep track of would be like the scale of the religion. Is it only in this one little town, or is it everywhere, right? What is the symbol? Because that, of course, could change over time. So just as a real-life example, Christianity, early Christians oftentimes used a fish as their symbol. Like the outline, a lot of you have probably seen the ichthys, the symbol of the, at least, a lot of people in the United States or in certain parts of Europe might have seen the ichthys, the sort of outline of the fish that was commonly used during the Roman era by early Christians as sort of like a symbol. And then, of course, later it got changed into the crucifix and so on and so forth. And then, of course, we also have another thing you might want to keep track of would be a figurehead. So who is the effective leader of this religion? Now, here we run into the first of the elements that I think kind of limits this tool, actually, a little bit. And that's it suggests an organized religion. This isn't really set up to sort of create, I guess you could say, a cultural, spiritual movement necessarily that's really decentralized. And that also influences this element here where we're talking about schisms and cults. Now, of course, many of you probably know, if you have a background in religion, is that a schism is, of course, when you have a group that gets split into two, right? So, for example, if our religion has a schism, let's say the Protestant Reformation was an example of a schism, right? The Great Schism, sort of the splitting between the sort of final division between the Orthodox, the Eastern Orthodox sort of movement and the Catholic movement, right? Those are schisms. Those schisms, in the context of this tool, create cults. And remember, please keep in mind, we're not talking about the modern definition of a cult, like a personality cult or something like that. Instead, rather, we're looking at like the academic definition of a cult, meaning a small, organized, centralized sort of religious movement that especially focuses on a particular set of beliefs or a particular person that is different from the religion that sort of surrounds it, not necessarily adding negative connotations to it, as has kind of become the norm for the word cult in English. So again, this is another element that, in my mind, really kind of suggests that this tool is really designed for creating organized religions in the sort of Western sense. So anyway, just to take a look at the chapters. In our first chapter, we're creating, right? We're creating our religion. So we create the person who kind of started it and how this religion kind of came into being. And again, here we come to our potentially using a D4 if we wanted to. So we could choose any of these 4 verses as being the primary reason why the religion came into being, right? So, for example, with occupation, right? It says here, a particular group are subjugated by an invader. Who are the oppressors? Who takes a stand? What beliefs help weather the constant blows? What is the symbol of hope that is passed around? So here, we could, by answering these questions, we potentially create the traits for at least the starting traits for our religion. So, who are the oppressors? Who are the opposition to this religion, right? Who takes a stand? Who is the person who starts this religion, right? What are the initial beliefs that they have that kind of help them survive not only as a religion, but probably also as a culture against influence from the outside? And then what is the symbol that they use to represent themselves? Right here they recommend taking a rest for a minute or two, thinking about how this religion starts to develop initially. And then they ask you another series of questions talking about the sort of the end of the creator of this religion, right? And again, here, this is really focusing on messianic religions, right? And by a messianic figure, I mean a person who kind of like has a revelation and shares it with the world, and as a result gains lots of followers. So this could describe Jesus or Buddha, or by Buddha I mean, Siddhartha. This could describe a prophet of some type. But this isn't exactly how I would necessarily describe a lot of more religions that have an older history. Oftentimes, we don't necessarily know who started them. We don't necessarily know how they got started. They just kind of started. So for example, like a lot of, let's say, ancient Egyptian religions, right? You can't really point to a figure who kind of got it started. There wasn't a prophet who started any of those traditional beliefs that a lot of ancient Egyptians had, with the exception of the worship of Atun, the sun spirit, by Akhenaten, right? We could think of him, Akhenaten, the pharaoh, being the founder of worship of Atun, right? potentially, or at the very least a messianic figure in that religion, because he was the one who introduced it to wider Egypt, right? But all of the other sorts of worship that we see in ancient Egypt, it doesn't really necessarily have that type of messianic figure. Chapter 2, we start to see breakups of the religion, right? The figurehead has died or has moved on in some capacity, the original founder, right? And so people are starting to get different ideas and they're starting to split apart. Again, if you want to take a parallel of this from, early Christianity, you would have the different movements that kind of compete against each other, like Paulism or, the different movements, early Christian movements that you see, like Arianism, stuff like that. So again, we've got 4 different verses you could pick from. So for example, here we have successionists, right? They believe that someone else is the original figurehead. Who do they believe is their leader? What do they think about the original religion? What minor beliefs or practices may differ? And what is their symbol? Right? So here for the successionists, this could be a reference back to, real life reference back to, let's say, the sort of initial split that we see between the Sunni and the Shia in Islam, right? Where we see they each think of a different line of succession for the successors to the Prophet Muhammad. Now we have the beginnings of dogma, is our 3rd chapter, where again we talk about sort of like how is it decided on what the rules of the religion are. Is only one, does here with imperialism, because there's lots of conflict, does only one interpretation remain, and it's kind of forced on everybody else? Do we come together and have a convention, like let's say the Council of Nicaea or something, right? Do we have a book that becomes the central authority, like we have, like let's say with the Tripitaka or with the Bible, right? Do we have a person who is seen as being sort of like the voice of the divine figure of this religion, like a prophet or a seer, the seer of Delphi, right? Things like that. Chapter 4 kind of discusses how this religion potentially spread. So again, here it specifically says proselytizing, but like maybe we have missions going out, like let's say with the Mormons, or maybe it follows a particular culture. Like the religion contributes a lot to culture, and so to the culture itself, like to its art and to its history and to like its science and stuff. And because of that kind of influences the spread of the religion inside of the culture as well. Maybe it's spread through conquest, a la the conquistadors of Spain, right? Or maybe it's spread because it becomes the official religion of a state. And so that kind of imposes it on a wider group of people than it would have normally, right? And again, here we want to take a look at what are some historical figures that might have been important in these movements. How do others, outsiders, see this religion, right? And who resists the spread of the religion throughout however means it ends up spreading. Then finally, we have how history, the progress of history, and sort of the, here it says modernity, which again, I'm not 100% comfortable with, but, it's just talking about how sort of the changing of the world has influenced. Maybe a better word here would have been like a changing world or something. So we have occultation, maybe a previous branch of a schism sort of ends up outgrowing the original. What does that look like? What are the beliefs of that original cult that has kind of become sort of like the main branch of this particular element? Maybe the religion ends up becoming commodified, like Christmas. Maybe the religion becomes more conservative, sort of tries to go back and embrace old ideas and try to become super traditional. Right? Maybe the religion starts branching out and absorbing non-traditional beliefs, like, let's say, Catholic Jesuits in East Asia, where they accepted and embraced a lot of beliefs that back in Rome got them in really big trouble. Like, being okay with, for example, the traditional practices in China and Japan of, honoring and Korea of honoring your ancestors, right? The Jesuits were okay with that, but future Catholic movements in East Asia were not, right? And then, so here we finally have reached the end. We kind of decide what our religion is going to look like in the modern day of the world, sort of review the history, kind of, smooth out some of the rough edges, kind of flesh out some ideas of things that's happened. And that's basically the end of the tool, right? So as a result of going through these 5 chapters, we have sketched out who created our religion, what are the starting beliefs of our religion, how it's changed throughout history, potential divisions within our religion, and sort of like branches of our religion that have kind of created sects, let's call them. How dogmatic or traditionalist or maybe open our religion is. How our religion likes to spread itself. Do we keep ourselves contained within a particular culture and spread with the culture? Or does the religion branch out and spread to other cultures? Right? Or is the religion spread through political force or violence? And has this religion stayed sort of a spiritual movement, or has it kind of been absorbed and co-opted into the culture and economy of a particular or state or society, right? So by combining all these things together, we've actually created a pretty fleshed out religion that either would incorporate pretty well into your world, or that could be the starting seed for a new world, whichever way you want to approach it. If you have picked up the bundle, I highly recommend that you at least take a look at this particular tool. Again, this is Schisms and Sacrilege by Michael Elliott. There are admittedly some limitations to this tool. Like I mentioned, it really kind of focuses on sort of like centralized, organized, messianic style religion, which of course is pretty familiar to those of us in the Western world with, Christianity and Islam and Judaism and stuff like that. And one thing I want to point out is that this particular tool does not really focus on the actual divinities themselves, right? This tool is all about the beliefs of the religion, how this religion influences the cultures around it, and how the history and the cultures around it have influenced the religion itself. There really is no discussion at all here about the actual divinities involved in it. So you could use this to create an organized polytheistic religion or a monotheistic religion, right? You could use this or maybe this is a religion that doesn't have any divinities at all, right? This is all entirely about the beliefs of the people themselves and how the people interpret it and how the people use it as a cultural tool, as a uniter or divider, whichever way the people end up using it, of themselves to others. Thank you all for joining me today. Again, the bundle is the Solo But Not Alone 2 bundle. There's 101 games. This is just the first one I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about a number of other ones. At the moment, I'm in the middle of looking at Adrift and sort of writing up a sort of actual play for that. Several other ones I'm potentially thinking about covering include After the Accident by Nicolas Ronvel. We have Go Alone by Chris Bissett. Let's see, what were some other ones I was looking at? Oh, yes, Babel by David Blondie. I already have one for Sacred Forge, which you can also take a look at right now. That's in the TTRPG playlist on the YouTube channel. I will also try and put a link, if I remember correctly, if I remember to put a link down below for that one as well. So yeah, I'm going to be taking a look at a number of these, probably archived. Time to Kill, if I get a chance, I'll probably take a look at Dead Belt, but that one's pretty involved. So I don't know if I necessarily will get around to that one. But yes, there's a number of games here that are really great, really good work, and I'm really looking forward to looking through them, and I hope you'll enjoy joining along. So, thank you very much, and have a good day. If you would like to show your support for this channel, or for the Hessens County blog, in the description down below, you will find links to the channel Coffee and also the Itch Store. Please feel free to take a look, and thank you for your support.